Welcome to the April 19th, 2022 meeting of Findlay City Council. Could we have the roll call, please?
Mr. Ballman?
Here.
Mr. Greeno?
Here.
Mr. Hellman?
Here.
Mr. Niemeyer?
Here.
Mr. Palmer?
Here.
Mr. Russell?
Here.
Mr. Slough?
Here.
Ms. Warnicki?
Here.
Mr. Weisner?
Here.
And Mr. Wobser.
Present.
We'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. My name is Grant Russell. I am President Pro Tem of Findlay City Council. When either the mayor or the president of council is absent, I roll over into the John Harrington seat. In this case, the mayor is absent, so John is acting mayor, and I am acting president of council for tonight's meeting. With that, could we have acceptance of our April 5th, 2022 regular session of council meeting minutes? Mr. Slough, thank you.
So moved.
Second, Mr. Ballman. Any questions or comments? All in favor of accepting the meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The meeting minutes are accepted. Mr. Wobser, I think we have a add-on or a replacement ordinance today.
Yes, we do, Mr. Acting President. We have a replacement for ordinance number 2022-19. This is an amendment simply changing the word meter to transmitter. This is in regards to the water transmitter project. And so essentially everywhere in the legislation that used the word meter, that has been changed to transmitter.
And that was in a form of a motion.
That is indeed a motion for this replacement.
And Mr. Palmer seconds. All in favor of the replacement ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that ordinance is replaced on the agenda. No proclamations, recognitions, or retirements. No petitions. No oral communications. No written communications. So we'll roll right into reports of municipal officers and municipal departments.
Findlay Municipal Court Activities Report for March 2022. Report be filed.
Yeah, report be filed.
Treasurer's Reconciliation Report for March 31st, 2022.
Questions or comments? Report be filed.
Summary Financial Reports for March 31st, 2022.
Questions or comments? Reports be filed.
Precipitation and Reservoir Levels Report for first quarter January to March 2022.
Questions or comments? Reports be filed.
Letter from Service Safety Director Martin regarding the insurance payment for the repair of Public Works building.
Questions or comments? Letter be filed.
Traffic Commission minutes for March 21st, 2022.
Questions or comments? Minutes be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding replace hypervisor, VMware, and security appliance.
Questions or comments? Letter be filed.
Letter from City Engineer Kalb regarding water pollution control clarifier rehab 3, 4, and 5, project number 356-01300.
Questions or comments? Letter be filed.
City Income Tax Monthly Collections Report for March 2022.
Questions or comments? Report be filed.
Findlay Shade Tree Commission 2021 Annual Report.
Questions or comments? Mr. Ballman.
I would just like to highlight a few things on the annual report there. One is that the commission in spring of 21, we worked very closely with the folks at the street department, Mr. Hans and Mr. Kopis, and we put a couple projects together there. We planted 5 trees on County Road 236 as a part of that widening project. and we planted 19 trees on Brookside Drive because of the fence replacement project that happened there. So we are planning for Neighborwoods, an adopted tree in October, and did just want to call everyone's attention to May 6th. We will have our Arbor Day program down at Chamberlain Hill. Everyone would be invited to that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Report be filed.
Findlay Fire Department Activities Report for March 2022.
Questions or comments? Report be filed.
Findlay Police Departmental Activities Report for March 2022.
Questions or comments? Report be filed. Committee reports.
The Strategic Planning Committee met on April 5th, 2022 to review public document studies and process update. We recommend the release of the documents after agreed upon and changes are made.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to accept the committee report.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Questions or comments? All those in favor of accepting the committee report, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Committee report is accepted.
Planning and Zoning Committee, to whom is referred a request from Daniel Stone, Van Horn, Hoover and Associates, Incorporated, on behalf of Stan Richards to vacate a portion of an existing road right-of-way of McLean Drive, the very southern end of roadway in the cul-de-sac area. We recommend approval as requested.
Mr. Hellman.
Move to accept the Planning and Zoning Committee report as presented.
Second by Mr. Weisner. Questions or comments? All in favor of accepting the committee report, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,
It's on, maybe I should get closer.
and anybody opposed to that committee report? And the committee report is accepted. Legislation.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-19 as amended. An ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director and/or City Engineer of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for construction, appropriating and transferring funds, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-019.
Second, Mr. Slough. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2022-019, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Third reading for ordinance 2022-22, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to sign the necessary paperwork to transfer ownership of Marathon Petroleum Company LP solar panel field that was built on the City of Findlay's Water Pollution Control Center's campus.
Mr. Slough.
I would move for adoption of ordinance 2022-022.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Questions or comments? Mr. Wobser.
Rob, are we still feeling good about this purchase?
Yes.
We've not found out anything in the meantime about the operation of that we didn't know previously?
No. In fact, we've had continued conversations. I had Vaughn Electric actually out. Part of the discussion last council meeting was that they came out, did a site assessment for operation and maintenance cost looking forward in the future. I did receive that quote, what that would look like in the future. It's significantly less than what it was for Marathon. Couple reasons. One in particular was that if you recall when Mr. Blacknick came and explained the process with the study they did, if you will, the R&D, some were fixed and some were rotational that moved with the sun. And what their research actually showed that the rotational, the benefit wasn't there compared to the actual expense of maintenance of hydraulic pumps and things that, moving parts that need maintained more than fixed parts, if you will. So when they actually come in as they're getting ready to get it up to 100% operational as promised in this agreement of transition, they are going to fix the rotational solar panels so they will not rotate, which will eliminate a significant amount of the operation cost. So I feel very comfortable where we're at. We continue to be on the same trajectory and looking forward to this benefit to WPC in the future.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2022-022, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
And Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Ordinance 2022-022 is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-24, an ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to partner with Hancock County by entering into a partnership agreement for the administration of the Community Housing Impact and Preservation, hereinafter referred to as CHIP, program for the purpose of addressing local housing needs within Hancock County, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Next. Oh. Mr. Wobser.
For reasons that we've got, these projects are ready to go. The money is there. We can get moving on these, and there's timeline would suggest that sooner is better. I would make a motion that council's rules be suspended and this ordinance be given its third reading.
Second, Mr. Greeno. All those in favor of suspending council's rules for ordinance 2022-024, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Council's rules are suspended, and this ordinance will be given its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-24.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Baumann. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2022-024, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye again.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-25, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director and/or City Engineer of the City of Findlay, Ohio, to advertise for bids where required and enter into contracts for various projects, appropriating and transferring funds for said capital expenditures and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
I believe there's several projects that are on this that we want to get started, so I would like to have the statutory rules of council suspended and this ordinance be given its third reading, please.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All those in favor of suspending council's rules and giving this ordinance its third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Baumann.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
The rules have been suspended, and this ordinance will be given its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-25.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-025.
Second, Mr. Wobser. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance 2022-025, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Wisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2022-26, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. Second reading for ordinance 2022-29, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract or contracts with Strand and Associates for the design of the downtown recreation area Phase 2 benching of the Blanchard River, appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency. First reading for,
The downtown recreation area, so this is the phase 2 of the benching, so east side of Main Street, north of the river. I was part of the crew that looked at the request for proposal from numerous firms, including Strand and Associates. There's a desire for them to get started so that their work can coincide with the benching work that's happening. The money has been appropriated. This was in our CapEx and projects, and this is something that we should take care of tonight. And for that reason, I'll move to suspend council's rules, statutory rules, and give ordinance 2022-029 its third reading. Second, Mr. Wisner. All those in favor of suspending council's rules and giving this ordinance its third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki, Mr. Wisner,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser, Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer,
Aye.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
and Mr. Russell.
Aye. The council's statutory rules are suspended, and this will be given its third reading.
Ordinance 2022-29.
Mr. Greeno.
Move for the adoption of ordinance number 2022-029.
Second, Mr. Wisner. Questions or comments for this ordinance? Mr. Wobser.
Jeremy, in lieu of the mayor not being here, this process, are we, and I apologize if you've answered this previously, are we going to have a chance to take a look at the whatever the contractor designs or suggests in this process? Or
Yeah, with the consultant, yeah, they're actually coming May 24th, and we'll send out a meeting notice to everyone involved with that. But yeah, they're going to get multiple renderings around, so that way we can kind of decide which route we want to go. But this is very preliminary right now. This is just get them started. That way they can kind of poll the city and talk to other people and see what is actually kind of needed throughout the city or what is desired. So yeah, this is very preliminary, but yes, we'll keep all you guys in tune with that.
What's your timeline for this initial phase?
They're saying there's three phases, and they're going to take roughly 3 to 4 months each phase. So this first phase of gathering information will be 3 months, and then so at the end we're looking at 10 to 12 months before we get a final product. But kind of talking with them, like I said, they're going to come with multiple renderings and just kind of keep narrowing it down each time we talk to them, see which way we ultimately want to go.
Very good, thank you.
Other questions or comments? All those in favor of this ordinance, please say aye after name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Ms. Warnicki. Aye. Mr. Wisner,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-31, an ordinance appropriating and transferring funds and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Palmer.
Since this is a routine transfer of money and receiving that insurance payment, I've moved that council's statutory rules be suspended and this legislation be given its second and third reading.
Second, Mr. Ballman. All those in favor of suspending council's rules and giving this ordinance its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wisner,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Council statutory rules have been suspended, and this ordinance will be given its second and third reading.
ordinance 2022-31, ordinance 2022-31.
Mr. Palmer.
Move for adoption of legislation ordinance number 2022-031.
Second, Mr. Hellman. Questions or comments? All those in favor of this ordinance, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Ballman,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
and Mr. Wisner.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-32, An ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to waive formal advertising and bidding requirements and enter into a contract or contracts for the replacement of the MS Hyper-V with VMware equipment, appropriating and transferring funds, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser.
I had a question on this, Mr. President. Jeremy, and I apologize, I should have asked this question back when the letter was presented. Your letter says that with the new system, the issues that we are experiencing should be alleviated. Is that a kind of a 50-50 should? Or are we a 95-5 should? Or
No,
is
it's
the
all
roll the
them.
dice should? What are we
Well,
thinking here?
You never want to say 100%. So, but they're saying with this new set, what they're experiencing is just kind of it's came around within the last couple weeks. They thought they can kind of milk this out a little bit farther, but talking with them, they've been experiencing some issues, and talking with the computer service, they said that these problems that they're experiencing with the new system and the upgrades will be alleviated from that. So if I have to put that out there, then yes, all the problems will be fixed.
It will be alleviated.
It will be alleviated.
I like your confidence. Thank you.
Until such time as they are not. That is just how VMware works. Other questions or comments? Are you in Mr. Palmer?
Because of the computer issues that they're having with this, I move that council's statutory rules be suspended and this legislation be given its second and third reading.
Mr. Baumann with a second. All those in favor of suspending council's rules, statutory rules, and giving this ordinance its second and third reading, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Bowman?
Aye.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
And Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Council's rules have been suspended, and this ordinance will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-32, ordinance 2022-32.
The council's rules have been suspended. Oh, yeah, we did that. And now, Mr. Palmer, there we are. I knew I'd get confused with myself at least once.
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-032.
Thank you. Mr. Hellman, a second. Questions or comments? All those in favor of this ordinance, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Greeno?
Aye.
Mr. Hellman?
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer? Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. Slough?
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki?
Aye.
Mr. Weisner?
Aye.
Mr. Wobser?
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
This ordinance has been adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-33, an ordinance authorizing the mayor, service safety director, and/or city engineer of the city of Findlay, Ohio, to enter into a contract or contracts with Mosier Construction Incorporated for the design and construction of repairs needed at the city of Findlay, Ohio's Water Pollution Control Center, appropriating and transferring funds, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Greeno.
Jeremy, I got a question. Is this something that's critical, or I believe with your letter, it's just to develop the plans to do the repair work, or?
Yeah, so this is the design build. The first phase of this will be designing it, because what we have in our clarifiers right now is we have concrete spalling, we have rebar showing, and it's not a set thing, say this is how you're going to fix it. It's going to have to be figuring out what the method's going to be, and ultimately what it's going to come down to, what the materials look like. So it's not like a cookie cutter type thing. It's very specialized. So that's why we went this route. But we do kind of have a timeline we have to hit this when it's in its drier season, because we have to use those clarifiers. Right. So if it goes through tonight, we can get them rolling and we can be ready for construction when it's drier. But if it goes one more, I don't think it's going to hurt. But the sooner we can get them rolling, the sooner we can get some plans, and we get in construction would be great.
Jeremy, can you explain this project at a high level? So, like, not at a Greeno level, but at a Russell level.
So the big round tanks that are out at WPC, they pretty much Randy, you might know, but they're 20-some, 25 years old or something like that. But with the amount of H2S or the chemicals that are within sewage is breaking down the concrete. So we're experiencing where the concrete is starting to kind of break down and deteriorate. And instead of just throwing a quick patch in there that's going to fall apart next year, we're trying to figure out, is it an epoxy that it's strong with that? How do you fix the joints so we don't have a leakage problem or anything like that? So it's pretty much just rehabbing our 20-year-old system so that way it can keep working. But we have 5 of them. So during heavy flow events, we have to have all 5 running. So anytime we have any of those down, then you're going to have more of a chance of sewage backup or something like that. So it's kind of, you got to hit those dry periods during that.
And so we're looking at 3 of the 5 that we're working on.
Yep, 1 and 2 have been repaired. That was done a couple years ago, I believe in 19. This will be 3, 4, 5, the last 3 of them. The first 2 weren't too bad, but these 3, like I said, it's kind of a different animal. Instead of just saying, oh, throw some concrete patch on, we need to really figure out so that way we have them for the long haul.
Did Moser do 1 and 2?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Hellman?
Yeah, I was gonna ask a similar question. I take it, this was bid out?
We did this as an RFQ process. So we had
Okay.
design build contractors send in their qualifications. We rated them off of that. And then we decided off the RFQ process, and we met with Moser to kind of get a scope together. And then this is where they gave us our price for the design.
All right, thanks.
Other questions, Mr. Greeno?
No other questions, but I'd like to move forward with this and suspend the rules of council and have this ordinance given its second and third reading so we can move forward.
Second, Mr. Baumann. All in favor of suspending council statutory rules and giving this ordinance its second and third reading, please say aye after name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Aye. Mr. Weisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Nay.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
And Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
With a 9-1 vote, council's statutory rules are suspended, and this will be given its second and third reading.
Ordinance 2022-33. Ordinance 2022-33.
Mr. Greeno?
Move for adoption of ordinance number 2022-033.
Second, Mr. Palmer. Questions or comments? All those in favor of this ordinance, please say aye after your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer. Aye. Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki. Mr. Weisner.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
First reading for ordinance 2022-34, an ordinance vacating a certain portion of an existing road right-of-way of McLean Drive, the very southern end of the roadway in the cul-de-sac area, hereinafter referred to as McLean Drive right-of-way vacation in the city of Findlay, Ohio.
Old business. Mr. Stasiak.
Josh, I'd really like to have your mic. You sound like a radio announcer on that thing. It's a good one. So. Hey, I'm sorry I missed this when the committee reports were done, and Councilman Wobser had the mayor sub in for him at our last strategic planning committee meeting, and we ended up with short time, but there was a document, and it's actually in your report package, of documents that went to planning next. I just wanted to verify, both for our benefit and the public's benefit, and certain council members, if they want to attend that don't normally, that we're going to finish the discussion as to whether or not certain documents should be forwarded to planning next, particularly the ones that have not gone through any public vetting or vetting of this council, specifically the Catalytic Opportunities Plan that came from the Alliance, the housing study, which we've had people in the public openly speak their concerns about, and there's a few other documents. I don't think it's a big deal, but I just want to make sure we are going to take the time to vet those. And I had sent an email message, and I didn't get a chance to check my emails in case you responded today.
Be covered in new business. It'll be covered. We're going to have a meeting on May 3rd.
Excellent.
Are we done with old business?
Sure. Mr.
Thanks.
Wobser.
Not to push you on, Mr. President. So I'd like to call a strategic planning meeting for Tuesday, May 3rd at 6:00 p.m. In the third floor conference room to discuss the documents provided to planning next.
Other new business. Mr. Hellman.
Yeah, I don't know whether this is old business or new business, but it's bothered me for a while when we get these reports from the tax department. And I know, was it Mary Price, is that her name? Yes, isn't here. But on some of these graphs, they show up as big black documents like this. And I don't know, Jim, if you know that or know how these are printed or not. Could we have them put some hash marks in there instead of black? Because it really doesn't make any sense to me. Probably not to anybody else either, where the differentiation is on those things, if you see what I mean.
Mr. Stasiak.
So if somebody runs into Mary, could you ask her to do that?
Yeah, I'll mention something to Mary also, and she does a wonderful job. She actually reports to the Income Tax Board, and that's a good venue to talk about that. And the Income Tax Board is supposed to approve any documents that you folks see, as well as recommend and take up rule changes and whatnot. The big thing there is maybe also print it in color. I think if it was in color, your life would be a lot easier in terms of interpreting it. The big one to look at there, though, I can share with you, is the collections year to date comparing the B, I, and W. B is business or net profits tax, I is the individual, and the W is the withholding, which is more than 80% of our monies. And it's nice, the income tax, business is down compared to last year. We expect that. We expect it to be down year to year because of some of the anomalies, but withholding is holding strong. And we'd like to see that continue well into 2023 because we do anticipate some drops there. So thanks for the question. I think that's an awesome question.
Thank you.
Mr. Wobser.
Along the same lines of that same report, what would be the third page of that report, I had a question. This report was added several years ago, back when there was concerns about businesses or individuals being given deferments for taxes. That has since been, to my knowledge, is all taken care of at this point. I'm wondering if we could save Mary some time by eliminating that report. Jim?
For you guys' benefit again, this is a report that I get regularly, or got regularly, that never went to council. At some point, they decided that there was value in providing it to this body. Where I find the value is it allows me to take a look at it by years. It didn't affect the deferrals so much as it impacted our past due collections and where we were at when people weren't paying in a timely manner during the recession. That helped us tremendously. So if they do, I don't think it's going to harm you guys not to get it. I think it would come up in Income Tax Board, and when you get the meeting minutes here, so there would be benefit to that, and I don't think you'd be missing anything, and there's a lot of detail on this. I guess the only thing I'd say is you probably want to add to that is the Income Tax Board needs to be more regular about getting you guys their minutes that are approved. With the last couple that have come have been prior to they've been approved by the board, and then once they've been approved, they haven't been submitted to council.
Understood. I guess my question, this would go to the Income Tax Board to discuss this, to see if we'd take this report out of the council packet. And so before that was done, though, I would ask, is there anybody on council that would have an issue with that? Or or would you prefer that it stay in?
I don't think that the report that you're talking about is really germane anymore, but the bottom part where they were, we had people that could directly file with the state of Ohio, and they would get a fee for that. I'm still interested in that information. I'm happy to see that folks are filing with us directly instead of with the state, generally speaking. But I'd want us to be able to see that if that trend changed. So while it reports nothing at the current time, there's some value there if it were to change. There were other parts of it, no, that had to do with the deferral has no relevance anymore.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Martin.
Just like to ask I guess the obvious, if Mary Price, being the subject matter expert in our administrative team, if she could actually be part of that discussion. If we're going to edit anything that she's submitting and having the why behind it, she could actually explain the value or be involved in that discussion a little bit. I'd appreciate that if we could.
And that would be at an income tax board, or that would be under the purview of the income tax board. But as for giving Jeff council's opinions. That's I think what we were doing.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Mr. Wobser, this is your last one. And
No, I didn't have any questions or comments. I had a new topic. Is that
Oh.
okay?
New topic.
Yeah.
Okay, you're good to go.
Strategic Planning Committee, I sent out an email today requesting your response on meeting dates. I wish, if you could you please look that up and respond as soon as possible so we can get a date on the books. This is for a June date when we will actually get the first look at the initial first blush of what Planning Next has been aggregating. So it'll be a lengthy meeting, approximately 2.5 to 3 hours long. I've given you some choices on dates, so if you would respond so that we can get that set, I would appreciate it. Along the same lines, just to say, without the mayor being here, strategic planning continues to move along very well. The in-person public meetings went exceptionally well. We had a lot of people attend at the various events. We had a lot of people use the online survey, which is still available, and I would encourage everybody that cannot attend or is not able to attend one of the pop-up meetings that are still coming in the next, actually starting tomorrow through the end of the month, to go to Findlay Forward Plan and use the opportunity in that online survey to give us your input. It would be greatly appreciated. And for council, if you would take the time to send that out to your social media accounts, through your social media accounts, I would certainly appreciate it. We've gotten good response so far, but the more the merrier. Other than that, things are moving along well.
So that website address again was findlayforwardplan.com?
Com,
Yes.
not org. Thank you.
findlayforwardplan.com. Other new business or old business or any businesses we so entertain? Seeing as though there is none, motion to adjourn. Mr. Slough. Second, Mr. Hellman. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. And we are done. Thank you very much.